plants, I know if they didn't get enough iron, it didn't matter how good everything else was, it just didn't work. Or if the soil pH, if the acidity of the soil was off, all the nutrients they wanted could be in the soil and they wouldn't be able to absorb them. I mean, it's like, conditions are really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a deficiency in something that is important for cellular function helps optimize your body do a certain function. So if it's lacking that, then, that function's not going to happen.
And I've heard similarly that pH in your body can be a very impactful in how it functions and how well you absorb nutrients also, like that carries over.
Yeah. That goes to, I love that you're using this landscape analogy, because I often reference, our gut flora is sort of like, you want to maintain that microbiome that requires like vitamins, minerals, like the right foods that you're nourishing the microbiome versus just like doing whatever it is. The standard American diet is pretty sad. So
hi, and welcome to Rich in Relationship. And we're going to have an amazing episode today. We've got Dr. Alice Fong. She's a naturopathic doctor who is an expert in stress and anxiety treatment. How are you today?
I'm great, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, such a pleasure. I'm super excited about this because I always think of stress management in terms of physical practices. I mean, practices, that's probably a better way to put it. And I never really think of it in terms of the work that you do. I'm curious. I'll ask you the question that everybody who listens to this show knows I ask. How did your heart lead you into this work?
Yeah. What led me into becoming a specialist in stress and anxiety was just my own personal experience with it from an early age of wanting to perform and be an overachiever. I think that's common in Asian cultures, of just wanting to do more and more and never feeling like you're doing enough, leading to this sense of anxiety. And it really actually bubbled up to be a problem for me when I was in medical school. This was well over a decade ago. My first year of medical school, I had 9 finals in my second quarter. And I would just work myself into the ground, studying till like 4 a.m. all week long and survive off Rockstar energy drinks. And basically, I ended up not doing that well on my finals, for one. And I ended up being sick for a whole week during my spring break, which was not fun either. And so it was really that lesson early on in my medical program that I realized that I can't do this, like burn myself into the ground with high amounts of stress. And I had test anxiety on top of that. And when I have anxiety, well, actually what happens to anyone with anxiety physically, like the blood is rushing to your heart to beat it faster so you can run away from danger. Therefore, less blood flow is going to your brain to have critical thoughts. So that doesn't help you perform on tests or just in general. And so I realized I really need to get a handle on my anxiety and manage my time and my stress better so I could actually get through my next quarter of exams. And, that next quarter, I made it a point to go to bed early, never study past 10 p.m. because face it, like, my brain isn't really functioning that well after a certain hour anyways. So it doesn't make sense to cram in more knowledge that won't really stick. And then, I took care of my well-being by exercising, eating right, meditating, all these things to really get the support that I needed, as well as take on like seeing counselors and therapists and all sorts of things to help me manage it. And, when I did all that, I did infinitely better on my finals that next final quarter of my first year. And so I finished out the school on a high note. And why I'm so passionate about stress and anxiety in particular, because I think stress is a major source for so many other health conditions and diseases. If you're living in,
I would argue it is the source.
Yeah, it's like a huge major source, if not the source. Absolutely.
When an organism isn't stressed, it doesn't get sick and it isn't under attack by other organisms.
Exactly. Yes. And it leads to diseases like high blood pressure, insomnia, sleep issues like that, digestive issues, skin issues, headaches, all sorts of things. And, if you have high blood pressure, that increases your risk for blood clots. therefore increases your risk for heart attacks and
Hmm.
strokes. So it's just like this vicious cycle that we really need to get a handle of our stress and our anxiety so it doesn't kill us, essentially.
So don't tell anyone this. I'm going to share a
Yeah.
secret with you.
Yeah.
Right? On my podcast /video blog.
Hmm.
Don't tell anyone.
Okay.
That I spent a large portion of my life working in, how are we going to put it? I guess today we're going to call it organic landscaping,
Okay.
right? Or it's a natural approach to landscaping.
Hmm.
And that whole statement I made about organisms, that's where that came from. Like what we found out was that when plants, which are relatively simple organisms,
Hmm.
have all the nutrients that they need and all the right soil conditions and all the right water and the right light conditions and the right air conditions,
Hmm.
that they thrive and they don't get, or they're much less likely to get sick. Or if they come under attack by another organism like an insect, the damage is going to be a lot less when the plant is healthy than when it's sick. And so that's where that came from. And I believe that's absolutely true for people.
Yeah.
Except
No,
that
I
except
agree.
we are far more complex, right? And the
Hmm.
difference is this thing between our ears,
Hmm.
can be a powerful good or a powerful evil. We could be in the right place in the right time with everything right and still be
Hmm.
thinking toxic thoughts.
Exactly. Our mental thoughts, especially if it's like negative self-talk, can impact our ability to get sick. It impacts our immune function. It just makes us more prone to those kinds of things. And I agree with your point about like having the right environment for our body and our mind is so important. I always emphasize the foundational pieces of health, like such basic things that we all know we need to be doing, like exercising, eating healthy, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water. Like those are so basic but so necessary, and
Mhm.
we kind of a lot, I think a lot of our society kind of forgets, like, oh, I want just like some magic pill to solve my problems. I don't want to do the hard work of building those healthy
A little
habits.
miracle grow and
Right,
everything
a
will
little
be
miracle
fine.
grow. And I'm like, wait, you need water too.
Yeah.
Those are important too. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, so our audience knows what exactly is naturopathy for a doctor.
Yeah. So naturopathic doctors are more holistic, integrative, functional medicine type of doctors that really focus on treating the root cause. And if you find a licensed naturopathic doctor, that's different than just a naturopath, because a licensed naturopathic doctor actually goes to a 4-year medical program that is trained as a primary care doctor that, depending on what state you are in, some states like Washington and Oregon, you can prescribe and, write scripts and do a full physical exam and order
Mhm.
labs and blood work. But the general principle, I often say that, it's not that we're trained in pharmaceuticals, but and there's definitely a time and place for pharmaceuticals. Absolutely. If it's a life-threatening type of thing, you might need that. But generally, pharmaceuticals are not getting to the root cause. They're not gonna heal you on a deeper level. It's just kind of suppressing the symptoms temporarily, which
Yeah.
maybe you need if you have extreme anxiety and can't function. That might be necessary. But ultimately, we want to get to the root cause. And, for anxiety, that might be looking at your past trauma or childhood wounds to heal. That might look at hormonal imbalances, neurotransmitter imbalances. If you're not eating healthy and clean, if you're not exercising, looking at all these variables that contribute to your well-being rather than just expecting the pill to, whether it's a pharmaceutical or a natural pill. I don't necessarily want to substitute one pill for
Mhm.
another. I want you to actually do the work to heal yourself,
Yeah.
and that takes time.
Yeah. Let me back up that symptom treatment is okay sometimes approach. So
Mhm.
in the landscape world, what we learned, I came into it as like I was ardently sustainable. Those
Yeah.
chemicals are evil, right? And
Right.
bad, bad, bad. And then I started to learn from people who had been doing it for a while
Right.
that sometimes in converting a landscape from being, we're going to call it chemically dependent just for the hell of it,
Right.
to something that was more holistic,
Mm-hmm.
that the plants were so weakened that you needed to maybe apply a little pesticide here and there just so that the plant would make it through until it had the root development that it needed in
Mm-hmm.
order to absorb the right nutrients, or until the soil caught up, or whatever it was you needed to do. And so it's not necessarily an all or nothing thing. It might be part of a transition from really bad health to really good health, we hope.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I want to get away from the idea of having judgment if you need the medication. You actually, some people do need that sometimes, and there's no judgment around that. But let's explore what else could we do to support your health, so you can maybe potentially, we can't guarantee that you could get off the medication, but with the right environment, the right support, it might be possible.
Yeah. Or even in couples work.
Mhm.
I do couples work, and I work with people divorcing a toxic spouse.
Yes.
And in both instances, there's always a sort of a halfway point before
Hmm.
there's a transition to healthier behavior, where they're before they can really let go of the behaviors that are not helping the relationship completely. They still have to taste it a little, experience it a little. It's almost a psychological comfort thing, but then they transition over. And I think that's very similar to what you're talking about. All right, so tell us,
Hmm.
how does a naturopathic doctor help with stress and anxiety?
Yeah, so my approach, you can have like five naturopathic doctors and one patient and 30 different plans. So it's one of the running jokes is that we all have like our various tools in our toolbox. And so the tools that I utilize in my particular toolbox, I had mentioned like, establishing the foundational components of health with
Right.
exercise and eating. Of course, I
Basic
always start with
well-being.
that. Yeah, that's the basic things that we all know we need to do, but sometimes struggle with doing the things we know to do. But the two tools that I do in particular that might be, that's specific towards my toolbox is biofeedback training, which is kind of like a relaxation training program to reprogram your nervous system to respond to stress in a healthier way. So instead of like, it's getting in tune with your body, so you're not always in this constant fight or flight
Uh-huh.
sympathetic nervous system state, and train your body to get out of that. So you're not in it all the time. You do need that stress response, but you don't need to be in it all the time, and that's what leads to health degradation essentially. The other tool that I offer, that seems to be really helpful and effective for people with their motivation, their confidence, is hypnotherapy, which is kind of like a blend of like sort of like counseling because I'm talking with them, but it's kind of like meditation. And I'm not actually the way I practice, and there's various styles of it, is that I'm actually conversing with them over here. There's areas concerned, really exploring what's going on in their subconscious mind that might be getting in their way of doing the things that they know to do. And this is really helpful because I give them really comprehensive treatment plans with their nutrition and their lifestyle. And I'm like, but if they don't do it, then they don't get the results. So it's like, okay, I need to address the motivation, the confidence. What are those mental, emotional blocks that stop them from doing the thing that they know they need to be doing? Or, maybe there's some childhood wounds to be healed. So,
And
mhm.
I'm going to guess in both of those approaches, I'm going to guess that's a 1-2 punch. I mean, our audience is
Yeah.
pretty familiar with the concept of an amygdala hijack. We talk about that a lot
Hmm.
here, right? Because
Yes.
when couples are fighting, or when people are getting divorced,
Yes,
the
definitely.
amygdala, the part of the brain that's fight or flight,
Hmm.
that's looking for danger, is
Right.
highly triggered and even expanded.
Hmm.
And the cerebral cortex tends to be a little more diminished when that's going on, because it's
Absolutely.
it's like a natural response to danger as we perceive it.
Right.
So I'm going to guess that that biometric approach, has to come first, because if you're
Hmm.
triggered all the time, if
Right.
you're always perceiving danger, or you're afraid of
Right.
something going on, it's going
Hmm.
to be very hard. You're not going to be open to hypnotic suggestion, or
Hmm.
to uh, exploring your unconscious mind.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
tell us
no.
more about the biofeedback. How does that work?
Yeah.
That sounds really scientific and cool, and
Yeah, it is
we like
actually.
toys.
It is really cool because, generally how I define it, it's getting feedback about your biology or your physiology. And technically, most people associate being hooked up to some sort of device that's monitoring your bodily functions, maybe your heart rate, your breathing, your skin temperature, things like that. Although technically, it's getting feedback about your body. So I could say, "Oh, I notice your shoulders are raised, drop them." technically, if I told you that, that's biofeedback. So there's a lot of different forms, but usually people associate, like, when I'm working with someone, and I work with people only exclusively virtually now. So I'm just doing it through Zoom. So I have them, if they want, we can do it without the device. But if they want the device to help them see how their heart rate changes with how they breathe, so they can learn to regulate their heart rate and therefore regulate their nervous system, that's a device I can train them on to use, so they can actually see like the physical evidence. Okay, my body's in that parasympathetic nervous system state. This is what I need to do. And, it's not to say you'll never get triggered. You're never going to get reactive. That's
No.
impossible, because you're a human being.
Well,
And it's about like, how quickly can I get out of that state? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, we want to have an amygdala because sometimes
Yeah,
there
of
really is
course.
danger.
Oh yes, it helps protect us, which is
Yeah.
important, but it does, it absolutely, I can experience in my own relationship when we're both triggered, we're not as good with communication. And so sometimes we both have to like calm down. And it's helpful if both parties know how to calm themselves down so they can come together and have a more productive
Yeah,
conversation.
the distinction we make for our clients here is there's two ways that feelings can show up. The
Mhm.
feeling can have you, where it's
Yeah.
like just this intense feeling and you're riding it, like riding that big wave in
Mhm.
Hawaii. You're just like, yeah, I'm angry.
Right, yes.
You're gonna have some, and
Mhm.
it feels so good when you're riding that wave. And then you get to the end of it
Yes.
and you're all of a sudden you're at like Desolation Beach, so like, oh my
Right.
God, what happened? What did I do?
I know, yes.
Right? You come down off of it, your spouse is leaving you or whatever,
Right.
and the other way though is where you can have the feeling. So you're
Mhm.
having the feeling, but you're not riding it like that crazy wave.
Right.
You're noticing it, you're acknowledging it. You might even be
Mhm.
having an inner conversation or dialogue with it, but it
Yeah.
isn't necessarily coming out all over the place. It may be at such a point where very often we encourage people to speak in I statements. I feel angry because of
Mhm.
this, and that's sort of the opposite of the blame thing. And the blame thing
Mhm.
is, Alice, every time you do that, you make me so mad, which is
Mhm.
instead of me saying, I'm so angry because of
Mhm.
what you just did, and it's a huge distinction for people.
Absolutely. Yes,
I
because
thought you were going to have like a flotation tank and maybe we were going to do
that
peyote.
would be pretty cool. I mean, I have nothing against that. You do you, whatever works for you.
Different kind
But
of naturopathic doctor. I got it.
right. But the other thing that I didn't mention is that I as a doctor, I can order like lab work and blood work to, kind of get I order functional medicine labs, which are different than your basic blood work.
Mm-hmm.
Basic blood work is important to do, make sure you're not dying major diseases or anything, but it doesn't, like, a lot of people, a lot of my patients, they have their basic blood work come back normal, but they feel like crap. And so it's like, what lab work can help them feel better in their body and mind? That's where functional medicine labs can help give you insight on how you can feel better, not to ensure that you're dying or not. So that's like looking at food sensitivities, hormones, neurotransmitters, your stress function, your adrenal function, essentially, vitamin mineral deficiencies, things like that can really give us insight of what's going on in the body and what we can do to
Oh,
optimize
I want
your
to come
health.
see you.
Of course, yeah, you can book a call.
No, I'm serious because I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with doctors about this. And the reason
Mhm.
is, so like going back to my previous incarnation, we used
Oh.
to intensely soil test. And then we
Mm.
would like, we wouldn't just look for phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium. It wasn't just that. It was like also trace minerals and micronutrients and things like that.
Mhm.
And how much organic material is actually in the soil. And, and the whole idea was we wanted to understand whether this was right for the plant. And I was like, how come nobody does that with my blood?
I know, right?
Like, how come when I go in for a blood test, nobody tells
Mhm.
me what nutrients I'm missing?
Mhm. Right.
And nobody I would talk to,
Mhm.
every health coach, I say to them, do you do blood work? They say no. I don't want to talk to you. So
Mhm.
that's what I said. I'm ready, Alice.
Yeah,
I'm
you
sending you
gotta
my blood.
yes, you gotta see a naturopathic doctor to get that lab work,
Okay.
for sure.
I know. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a thing.
Yeah, and it's super important, right? If you're not
Mhm.
getting the plants, I know if they didn't get enough iron, it didn't matter how good everything else was, it
Mhm.
just didn't work. Or if the soil pH, if the acidity of the soil was off, all the
Mhm.
nutrients they wanted could be in the soil and they wouldn't be able to absorb them.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right.
it's like, conditions are really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a deficiency in something that is important for cellular function helps optimize your body do a certain function. So if it's lacking that, then, that function's not going to happen
And
so
I've
much.
heard similarly that pH in your body can be a very
Mhm.
impactful in how it functions and how well you absorb nutrients also, like that carries
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. Yeah. That goes to, I love that you're using this landscape analogy because I often reference, our gut flora is sort of like, you want to maintain that microbiome that
Yeah, it's like
requires like
soil
vitamins,
culture.
minerals, like the right foods that you're nourishing the microbiome versus just like doing whatever it is. The standard American diet is pretty sad. So that doesn't really support a healthy gut. And that like, yeah, if you're not eating healthy, then maybe you're not getting all the vitamins and minerals that you need. So it's important to kind of also modify your diet
Well, so
accordingly.
when I was doing that work, I would say to people, soil is just like your intestines, and they
Exactly.
wouldn't get it,
Yeah, no, I get it.
because they didn't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great analogy because it's like it's a living being. You are a living being. We're all living beings, and what living beings need are nourishment in the right way. But it's helpful to know what exactly it needs.
And so we may go a little long. I hope that's okay with
Yeah,
you.
no, it's
So
fine.
if I turn this on its head,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking you could have a lot of emotional stress
Mm-hmm.
due to a lot of, if I take the plant analogy all the way to the end,
Yeah.
you have a lot of emotional stress just due to the fact that you're not eating right, or
Mm-hmm.
your pH is off, or that the microbial activity in your intestines is off, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How would that translate into your emotional state?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, emotional stress is going to impact your mood. It could cause the anxiety, like I mentioned. It might cause the depression. It might make you more irritable and
Hmm.
angry. Potentially, could make you just like less focused and just more like flabbergasted most of the time. All those things could definitely happen when the right conditions aren't met.
And then the other way around,
Mhm.
I know that when people are constantly, I think what this is where we started, when people are constantly triggered or in a certain emotional
Mhm.
state, that's going to impact the chemistry of our body.
Yes, exactly. And that impacts the chemistry and that leads to certain types of diseases if it's prolonged and nothing changes. So it's like you got to do something about it before it progresses to something more serious. And I want to make that distinction between, there's the emotional stress, maybe we have a strained relationship or maybe our work is really stressful. But there's also, even though I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't feel like mentally stressed. I'm fine," even though like their work life balance is perfect. But having a physical disease also is putting stress on your body. Like if you have diabetes, if you are overweight, that's technically putting stress on your body. So it's still having a similar impact on your body that isn't serving you.
My phone's ringing and I can't find it. It's a disaster. I'm going to leave it alone. All right. How can people find you?
Yeah, they can go to dralicefong.com. That's DRALICEFONG. Or if they want to grab my free stress guide, they can text yes to 66866. And on my website, I have a free workshop as well on how to break free from stress and anxiety naturally, as well as my online program, which has basically the accumulation of over like 15 years of knowledge and tools that not everyone can afford to work with a naturopathic doctor, I'll say. So I created this online program that are all the tools and the homework assignments that I give my patients anyways. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like a do it yourself type of training. And I want to make it affordable to anyone to have the tools that they need to be successful in life. And that's only $7 a month. They can go to joinsbp.com. That's joinsbp.com for Stress Busters program.
Incredible. What a
Mhm.
what great resources you have.
Yeah.
May I ask you the question I ask everyone at the end of the show, even though I
Sure.
don't want you to go away?
Of course.
The question I ask everyone at the end of the show is, what's the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Yes. The legacy that I would love to leave behind, and I would say, it is in alignment with my business name. Is called Amour de Soi Wellness, which is love of self in French, not in a narcissistic way, but as a means of survival. The legacy I want to leave behind is that everyone in the world feels loved, heard, and understood, and they never feel alone.
Oh, I
And
love
it
that.
starts with it starts with loving yourself first and foremost. And you got to take care of yourself and your well-being to be able to be there for others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Let me, for our audience, just make a distinction that narcissism
Mm-hmm.
is love of self at the expense of others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's not what we're talking
Exactly.
about here. We're talking about if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself first when the
Mm-hmm.
plane's going down, then you might not get off the plane, and neither will your kids. You
Right.
know, that's what we're talking about here. If you don't charge your own battery
Mm-hmm.
adequately, you have less to give others. And so, very often I encounter people in all walks of relationship who are always they're like natural parents. So
Mm-hmm.
they sacrifice themselves for their kids. They sacrifice themselves for their work. And the problem with that is that they stop taking care of themselves, and all of a sudden the bottom drops out from under them, and they get physically sick, or they get very emotionally angry and disturbed, or both.
Mm-hmm.
And until their battery is charged, they can't take care of anyone. And
Mm-hmm.
typically, people who live like that, actually, they go through that. They repeat that pattern over and over.
Right.
So what Dr. Fong is telling us is it's super important that we take really good care of our mind, body, and whatever it means to you, spirit, so
Mm-hmm.
that our battery is at 100% when we go out on our day, and we can really then meet life at 100% instead of at 50 or 30%.
Absolutely. Most people wouldn't let their phone drain completely dry, but we forget to charge ourselves, which is, we're not robots. We need to be charged too, and it's not selfish in any way to take a moment to breathe so you can just keep going, and take a nap when you need to, or just take a bath, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I'm so sorry we didn't get to talk much about the hypnotherapy aspect of it.
Hmm.
I think that's really a lot of the work that coaches, therapists,
Hmm.
doctors do with people is
Hmm.
helping them identify thoughts and patterns that may have served them earlier in their life that aren't doing so much for them today.
Yeah.
But that's a really rich topic, but maybe another time.
Yeah, of course. That'd be great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay.